I helped an elderly woman in South Africa. She turned out to be part of a human trafficking network. I don't know how to start telling this without my hands shaking. I made many mistakes in my life, but I never imagined that helping an old woman on a dusty road in South Africa would be the worst of them all. Well, I still don't know how to pay for. It all began 2 years ago when I decided to take a volunteer trip to Cape Town with an organization that claimed to help impoverished communities. I was 27 at the time, had just quit a draining job in London, and was looking for some kind of redemption, or maybe just a way to feel useful. I had no experience with volunteer work. I arrived with an oversized backpack, sunglasses I never took off, and a DSLR camera I mostly used to document my ego rather than the reality around me. The first week was spent between community workshops, rebuilding damaged homes, and teaching basic English to children in a rural school. It was romantic in the worst sense. I felt like a hero. And then I met her. It happened on a particularly hot afternoon. We had just finished a long day of street cleaning in Khayelitsha, one of the most poverty-stricken areas on the outskirts of Cape Town. I lagged behind the group, taking pictures of the sunset. On the way to the transport that would take us back, I saw an elderly woman dragging a grocery bag and visibly limping. She was thin, with dark, wrinkled skin like strong coffee. She wore a red headscarf and a faded floral dress. She looked at me as if she already knew I was going to approach her. And I did. "Do you need help?" I asked in English. She didn't reply immediately, just pointed to the bag and then to a tin and wood shack about 100 meters away. I smiled, grabbed the bag, and accompanied her. Inside, her home was dark but clean. There was a bed covered with a knitted quilt, a small altar with unlit candles, and photos of people I didn't recognize. She offered me water I accepted, and when she sat across from me, she finally spoke. "My name is Anil," she said softly, in heavily accented English. We talked for nearly an hour. She told me she lived alone, that her daughter had died in a car accident, and that her granddaughter had been missing for 2 years. Her story pierced me. Something in her tone, the way her eyes glistened without breaking into tears, made me promise I'd come back the next day. And I did. And the day after that, I became a sort of regular visitor. I brought her food, helped with basic chores, even managed to get her medication. My fellow volunteers asked why I disappeared so many afternoons, and I just told them I found something more important. They assumed I was helping a family in need, and in part, I believed that too. But everything started to change the sixth time I went. Zanil wasn't alone. There was a man, tall, thin, wearing a white t-shirt and military-style pants. He didn't look like family. They were speaking in Xhosa, and when he saw me enter, he stopped talking. He looked at me coldly and walked out without a word. Zanil only said, "Family friend," but her eyes told me something different. During the next visits, I found more people. Young men, silent, leaving the house without looking at me. I asked about them, and Zanil always had an excuse: nephews, neighbors, community helpers. And I, like an idiot, believed her. One day, she asked me to accompany her somewhere. It was nighttime, something we'd never done before. She told me she needed to pick up medication she couldn't get in her neighborhood. I hesitated, but agreed. We walked 20 minutes along dirt streets to a warehouse with a collapsed facade. No lights. Zanil knocked 3 times. Someone opened the door. Inside, the atmosphere was completely different. 3 men were gathered around a wooden table, reviewing papers and photographs. In a corner, a very young girl, she couldn't have been more than 16, was sitting on the floor with her hands tied. I froze. Zanil didn't look at me. She walked around comfortably, spoke in Xhosa, and one of the men handed her an envelope. Only then did I notice she didn't have any medication. I turned, trembling. "Who are they? What's going on here?" She approached me slowly. "Don't ask questions, son. Just help me get back home." I walked her home in silence, each step heavier than the last. I couldn't sleep that night. The next day, I confronted her. "What is that place? Who was that girl?" Zanil stared at me for a long time before speaking. "It's not what you think, but you can't get involved. Here, the police don't help. Here, everyone's afraid. Even you should be." I left. I wanted to tell the organization, but what would I say? That an old woman who seemed like a sweet grandmother was connected to something dark? No one would believe me. So I decided to return to the warehouse on my own. I went during the day. It was locked. A rusty padlock hung from the gate. No signs of anything strange. I knocked, shouted, waited. Nothing. In the following days, I noticed I was being followed. A man on a motorcycle, sometimes 2, always about a block behind me. One night, someone threw a rock at my hostel window. It didn't break, but there was a note stuck to it: "Stay out of what you don't understand." I couldn't stay silent. I contacted a local journalist I had met at an event. I told him everything. At first, he doubted me, But when I showed him pictures I had taken with my camera, one of them showed the same man from the warehouse entering with a young girl. His expression changed. He told me he'd investigate, but that I needed to be careful. I saw Zanil one last time. What are you doing? I asked without holding back. She lowered her gaze. I'm trying to survive, at the expense of girls like her. What are you doing to them? You wouldn't understand. You didn't grow up here. You don't know what it's like to be hungry every day, to lose your family, to watch the police mock you. Sometimes people do horrible things just to keep breathing. Her words left me frozen. There was no hatred in her voice, just a soul-crushing resignation. I left without saying anything else. But a week later, the journalist contacted me. He asked to meet at a cafe far from the city center. When I arrived, he was nervous, agitated. You got yourself into something big, he told me. That woman, Zanil, she's not just a collaborator. She runs a network. She's connected to at least 3 neighborhoods, and there's evidence of child trafficking, forced labor, and worse. I didn't know what to say. They want to silence you, he added. One of my contacts was beaten 2 nights ago. You need to leave. Now, that night, I went back to the hostel to pack. My flight was in 3 days. I wasn't going to risk waiting. But before I left, I wanted to do one last thing. I returned to the warehouse with my camera. I wanted proof. I don't know if it was ego or guilt. Maybe both, but it was a mistake. The place wasn't empty anymore. Someone was waiting for me inside. The door slammed shut behind me. I felt a hand grab my neck, and another ripped the camera from me. In the dim light, I saw the face of the man in the white t-shirt. We warned you, idiot, he spat angrily. There's no turning back now. And then I saw Zanil, sitting in a corner, watching me. Without saying a word, the door slammed with a sharp, metallic sound. The clang of iron against the frame still echoes in my ears, like a funeral bell. I froze, instinctively looking back, where a crack of light disappeared along with any chance of escape. The man in the white t-shirt approached slowly, his breath heavy, his eyes full of hatred. It was the same man I had seen weeks ago at Zanil's house, the same one who always left when I arrived. The first slap felt like crashing into a concrete wall. It knocked me to the ground, my camera flying from my hands and smashing against a table leg. It didn't break completely, but the lens bent. I could hear the dull ringing in my right ear as a boot pressed against my chest. You think you're better than us? You come to save our girls like you're some fucking angel, he shouted, his English rough and distorted by rage. I tried to speak, but the pressure on my chest took my breath away. I barely managed to raise my hands and surrender. I looked at Zanil. She was still there, sitting in the shadows, as if she didn't belong to this place. As if none of this belonged to her either. She wore the same floral dress as the first time I met her, but now it looked bigger, darker, as if each flower was stained with something I couldn't see. Why did you come? She finally asked without moving. Her voice was different now. Gone was the sweet, frail tone of a helpless old woman. It was firmer, colder, more real. I forced myself to respond, still struggling under the weight on my chest. I wanted proof to expose this to help that girl. The man in the white t-shirt laughed. A cruel, hollow sound. Help? You know nothing about this, idiot. He grabbed me by the collar and half lifted me off the ground. My feet barely touched the cement floor. I could see the place more clearly now. It wasn't just a warehouse. In the back, there was a tarp curtain, and behind it, muffled voices, someone crying, pleading. The smell was the worst. A dense mixture of urine, sweat, and rotten food. And beneath it all, the unmistakable metallic scent of blood. What do you do here? I managed to ask. He shoved me violently. I felt my knees. Nothing that concerns you. This isn't your country. These aren't your rules. Zanil finally stood up. She walked slowly toward me. Looked down at me. What did you expect? That I was some sweet grandmother needing to be saved? She asked. You have no idea what it takes to survive here. I've been alone since I was 11. Lost my mother to disease. My father left chasing a future and never came back. I went through things no one should endure. Betrayal, abuse, abandonment. And when I finally had something of my own, I protected it with everything I had. I listened, feeling a mix of anger, confusion, and sadness. Nothing she said justified what I had seen, but I couldn't ignore it either. And those girls, I asked, my voice breaking, do they deserve this? Were you one of them? And now you continue the cycle. She looked at me. For the first time, I saw something resembling pain in her face, but it was gone in a second. I give them a chance. You only see chains. I see food, shelter, protection. Protection? You keep them locked up. She sighed. Not all of us have the luxury of choice. A door slammed behind the tarp, cutting off our conversation. Another man appeared, holding a cell phone. We've got a problem. The journalist. He published something. It's spreading on social media. Zanil froze. How bad? she asked, her voice trembling slightly, enough to attract attention. We need to clear this place. Now, everything turned into chaos. The men started moving boxes, locking interior doors, turning off lights. One of them pulled out a gun and placed it on the table. They dragged me to a corner, tied my hands with a thick rope, and gagged me. The scene felt like something out of a nightmare. One of those where you scream, but nothing comes out of your mouth. Zanil crouched down in front of me and looked at me with eyes that were no longer those of a frail old woman or a strong leader. They were the eyes of someone who had given up inside. "We're not going to finish you," she said. "But you can't stay in South Africa." I tried to speak. All I managed was a muffled murmur. "We're going to leave you in the desert, where no one will find you for a few days. So you understand this isn't a game." They hit me on the head with something. I didn't see it coming. The next thing I remember is waking up tied inside a moving van. The rattling engine, the suffocating heat, and a constant buzzing in my ears. My lips were dry, my wrists sore from the ropes, and a wave of nausea twisted my stomach. I tried to move, but it was useless. I could only look through a small gap between the tarp covering the back. We were driving through a completely deserted area. No houses, no lights, only red earth and stones. Finally, the van stopped. They dragged me outside. The sun hit me like a slap. It was around 3 in the afternoon, or so it seemed. The man in the white t-shirt pushed me to the ground. "You walk straight for an hour and you'll find a road. Maybe someone will pick you up. Or not. And if I die," I managed to spit out, "then you won't stick your nose where it doesn't belong again." They let me go and left. Alone. No water. No direction. I walked. Or rather, I crawled. Every step was torture. The sun showed no mercy. My mind tormented me with images. The girl's tied-up face, Zanil's gaze, the journalist, the men with guns. Everything spun. I vomited. I fell. I got up. I kept going. After who knows how long, I heard an engine. It was an old Toyota. It stopped. A tall man with light skin and a fisherman's hat got out. "Are you alive, my friend?" I nodded as best I could. He carried me, poured water into my mouth, and took me to the nearest town, Calvinia, a small place hours away from Cape Town. At the police station, I told a butchered version of the story. I said I'd been robbed, beaten, and abandoned. Nothing more. I didn't trust anyone, not even the police. The journalist, whose name was Mfo, came looking for me 2 days later. He hugged me like we were lifelong friends. "You have no idea what you did, brother. Thanks to your camera, we were able to identify several men. The photos went viral. But that put you in danger. They're looking for you." And Zanil, he hesitated. "She disappeared, as always. But someone talked. A girl escaped because of the scandal. She said the woman who cared for her was like a mother, but also her jailer. They gave me temporary asylum while they coordinated my departure from the country. I felt like a criminal, like I had betrayed someone. And in a way, I had. I betrayed my own naivety, my ignorance. I thought helping was enough, that things were black and white." A week later, Mfo contacted me again. He sounded agitated. "There's more," he told me. The photos woke up a sleeping network. A woman called me. She says she worked with Zanil for years. That Zanil didn't just recruit, but delivered girls to someone else. A European, Ruben. "Does that name mean anything to you?" It didn't. She says he runs everything. That Zanil is just a piece of the puzzle. And that you've been part of their plan from the beginning. A chill ran through me. "What do you mean? That she chose you?" From the very first moment, I refused to believe it. But then, the night before my return flight, I found a note under my door. It was a photo. Me, carrying the bag from the first day. Zanil behind me, smiling. And on the back, handwritten in perfect penmanship, "Thank you for being part of this. This is only the beginning." I returned to Johannesburg for just a few more days. Officially to prepare for my departure. Unofficially to understand. To face what I had experienced instead of running away and turning it into a confused memory. I didn't want to escape. I wanted to close the circle. And although I denied it, deep down I also wanted to see her again. Zanil, with her slow steps, kind voice, wobbly chair, and deceptive frailty. I stayed in a discreet hostel near the center. The receptionist was a young guy with poorly kept dreadlocks and a contagious laugh. His name was Cabello. He helped me get a local number and move around unnoticed. The first night, he asked me in a low voice while wiping down a table, "Are you the gringo with the camera?" I looked at him cautiously. He raised his hands. "Don't worry. I'm not going to turn you in. It's just that my cousin was in one of those photos. She was locked up, crying. But someone recognized her and went for her. She's alive because of you." I stayed silent. I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't used to people thanking me for something that felt so dirty, so confusing. "Do you know anything about Zanil?" I finally asked. Cabello scratched his head. "That's more complicated. The lady had allies. Not just here. She had protection, but there was movement at one of her places. An old boarding house in Soweto. People are nervous. Don't go alone. Of course, I went alone. The boarding house was hidden on a side street between a barbershop and a clothes market. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary house. Rusty bars, thick curtains, windows without glass. But there was movement, muffled noises. A couple of kids ran when they saw me and hid behind a door. I didn't see cameras or weapons, just poverty, and that was the most dangerous part. It looked harmless. I knocked. I waited. No one answered. I sat on a concrete bench out front, as if I were waiting for someone. A woman in her 50s came out with a broom and began sweeping the dust from the sidewalk. She watched me cautiously from the corner of her eye. "You're not lost?" she said after a while, without looking at me. "I'm looking for Zanil." She stopped sweeping, looked at me. Her eyes were tired. A scar crossed her forehead like a dry crack. "She's not here anymore, but someone wants to see you." I stayed still. "Who?" "Cool me. There are no traps. It's not like before anymore." I went in. The walls were covered in old wallpaper. It smelled of oil, sweat, and confinement. The woman led me down a hallway to a modest living room with a torn sofa and a rusty wheelchair. There she was, but not Zanil. It was a girl. 17, maybe younger. Skin dark as coal, big eyes, wearing a tracksuit 3 sizes too big. She had a dirty bandage on her arm and walked with difficulty. She looked at me like she knew me. "My name is Nambula," she said. "You took my picture, the one by the metal door." I was the one screaming. I felt the floor shift under me. "Are you okay?" "No one's okay after that. But I'm breathing. That's something." She sat down, gestured for me to do the same. "Zanil's not in charge anymore. She's gone. But she's not hiding. Not like you think. She's sick." What sickness?" "Leukemia." She knew for a while. That's why she was rushing everything. She wanted one last big move. Export 5 girls to the north. "You ruined it." I was speechless. She shrugged. "I don't hate her, you know. She saved me from something worse. Before, I was in a shelter where men came with knives and the police didn't even look. At least Zanil fed us." It was hard for me to process. Each version carried its weight. None of them were clean. All were smeared with context. And the rest? I asked. Some went back to their towns. One ended herself. Another was taken in by an NGO. But there's one. Fando. She knows more. Much more. She was like her shadow. If anyone knew that European they're talking about, it was her. "Where is she?" "Selling cigarettes at the corner of Brie and Sour. By the bus station." I went that same afternoon. I walked among street vendors, plastic bags floating like ghosts between people's feet. The intersection was a chaos of taxis, motorcycles, shouting, and horns. It took me 20 minutes to find her. She was thin, with braided hair, wearing a Manchester United t-shirt. When she saw me, her expression changed immediately. "You're the one who went where you shouldn't have. Nambula sent me." She sighed, took out a pack of cigarettes, and offered me one. I declined. "What do you want to know?" "Who was Ruben?" The mention of the name made her tense up. He was the real boss. White, European. Spoke French and some English. Came every 3 months. He chose. He paid. Sometimes he kept one. Never said where he took them. But they had passports. Fake stamps. Did Zanil work for him? She owed him. I don't know how much. Or why. But she worked in fear. "Where can I find Ruben?" She looked at me like I was insane. "You want to die? You've already seen what they do. I don't want to hide anymore." "Then be ready." She gave me a name, Club Mirage, on the coast in Durban. Supposedly one of the places where Ruben made contacts. It wasn't just any club. It was a private club for a certain kind of clientele. The entrance fee was more than what a local earned in a month. But the important part, there were girls, and a system behind it. I went back to the hostel and told Mfo everything. He looked at me intently. "Are you going?" "Yes." "You know you might not come back?" I nodded. "Then don't go alone." That night, Mfo gathered 3 people. Not police, not journalists, survivors. Men and women who had been inside that network. One was a bouncer at a bar, another a nurse, and the last an Uber driver. All with stories marked by violence. They wanted justice, or revenge. They didn't care which was which. The operation was simple. Get in, record, identify, get out. I would be the bait. I'd fake interest. Mfo would go as my cousin. One of the others would sneak in as a beverage supplier. The nurse, from a van outside, would monitor everything with a microtransmitter. When we arrived at Club Mirage, the atmosphere was one of decadent luxury. Bodies shining under dim lights, laughter in several languages, champagne in glasses that weren't plastic. Everything reeked of impunity. A woman greeted us. Tall, white, with a German accent. She led us to a private lounge. "Where are you from?" she asked with sharp politeness. "Colombia and South Africa." Mfo said. "First time?" We nodded. "Then you need to meet Ruben." My skin prickled. She left, and came back minutes later with him. Ruben didn't look like a monster. He was about 50, very white skin, blue eyes like blades. He wore a blue guayabera and loafers. Smiled a lot, had soft hands, and didn't blink. What exactly are you looking for? He asked. Something young, exotic. I replied, fighting back nausea. He nodded. We have options, but not here. Here we only show what's allowed. If you're interested in more, you need to invest. We do private deliveries. People no one misses. No one looks for. Mfo was recording everything from his pocket. Ruben suspected nothing. Do you know Zanil? He asked suddenly, looking me straight in the eyes. Silence. She talked about you. The curious tourist. The brave journalist. We thought you'd left, but it's good to see you're still interested. He leaned toward me. Zanil died last night. I felt a pit in my stomach. Mfo grabbed my arm, a signal to stay calm. Leukemia. She refused treatment. Said it wasn't worth it. Died peacefully. I doubted it, but didn't argue. Now I'm alone, Ruben said, and I'm looking for new partners. People not afraid to get their hands dirty. I stood up. When not your partners. Oh, of course not, he smiled. But you're already inside, and getting out isn't as easy as getting in. The next night, one of the survivors helping us was found lifeless in his car. The doors were locked. No signs of violence. But his phone had vanished, and with it the recordings. Ruben didn't need to hide. He knew that in South Africa, impunity had a name. And now, I was too involved to escape. The death of Saifo, the Uber driver who had helped us, pierced us like a spear. They found him with no visible signs of violence, but we all knew what it meant. Ruben had responded, and he had done so with surgical coldness. The night we buried him, Saifo's sister, a thin woman with braids tied under a white scarf, hugged us without words. Her eyes held no tears, only a restrained fury that seemed to breathe through her pores. My brother didn't die alone, she said. Now you need to make sure he didn't die in vain. That night, for the first time, we talked about doing more than documenting. We had to intervene. I still had Thando's contact, the cigarette vendor who knew Ruben's movements well. I met with her in a public park, under the shade of old trees, where children played among broken swings and stray dogs slept in the sun. She arrived late, wearing a military jacket and an old cap. Sat next to me without a greeting. You can't keep doing this, she said bluntly. They already know your face. You can't walk through Brie without someone watching you. So, I leave and let them keep going? No. Then you do it differently. How? She pulled a small notebook from her pocket, tore out a page, and handed it to me. It was handwritten with names, times, and places. Deliveries, meetings, routes. It was a transport schedule. Tomorrow night. Boxburg, a warehouse near the airport. 5 girls. Ruben will be there. How do you know that? Because I was going to be the 6th. I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw her trembling. I volunteered to buy us some time. But if you go, someone has to replace me. And someone has to record everything. This is the only chance. After this, they leave the country. With everything, I gather the group. There are only 4 of us now. Mfo, me, a woman named Karabo, who had been a victim in Mozambique and was now living with fake documents, and Cabello, the guy from the hostel. Karabo volunteered to go in undercover. The decision was devastating. She had already lived that hell, but she insisted. I'm not the same. This time I'm going in with my eyes open. And with a camera. We set up the operation with minimal resources. We used hidden cell phones, black market transmitters, and improvised cameras taped to underwear. Everything was risky. Nothing guaranteed success. But there was no turning back. The night of the meeting at the warehouse came. It was an old building with no signs, giant metal gates creaking in the wind. We parked about 100 meters away. Karabo went in alone. My heart pounded in my chest with every step she took. Mfo and I hid behind a shipping container connected to the audio. Cabello kept watch from the vehicle. Ruben's voice was the first thing we heard. Clear, polite, cold. Your name? Karabo. She answered without hesitation. Age? 22. Any medical conditions? None. He mumbled something to an assistant. Then, a door opened, and we heard them enter what sounded like another room. What are you carrying with you? Just this, Karabo said. We heard footsteps. A thud. Then silence. For eternal seconds, we thought she had been discovered. But her voice returned, shaky. There are other girls. They're not speaking. They're under the effect of something. One is crying, but no one looks at her. I'm recording everything. Fo looked at me. His jaw was trembling. How long? I asked him. I don't know. We have to go in and die like Saifo and let them take the girls. The dilemma was cut short by a scream through the transmitter. Help! Help! We ran. The metallic sound of our footsteps echoed through the warehouse. The back door was open. Inside, there was chaos. A man lay on the floor, blood pouring from his head. Karabo held an iron bar. They've got the girls in a truck. Close the gate. Cabello, who had arrived behind us, ran to the gate. Two men were trying to start the truck. Mfo faced them with a rock in hand. I, not even knowing how, ended up on top of the vehicle, banging on the cabin to distract them. One of the girls inside the truck broke a window and screamed. Another started kicking from the inside. They weren't unconscious, just sedated, and now they were fighting. In less than 3 minutes, chaos took over the place. One of the men fled. The other was subdued by Karabo and Mfo. Ruben was gone. When the police arrived, called by a neighbor who heard the screams, everything had already happened. 4 girls were rescued. One had burns on her arm. Another could barely speak. Karabo was bleeding from her nose, and I had a torn shirt and a cut on my arm. They arrested us all for trespassing, for assault, for aggression. But that same night, the videos were leaked. Not by us. Thando posted them in a local Facebook group. The footage was undeniable. Ruben giving orders. The sedated girls. The weapons. The lists. In less than 24 hours, it went viral. The police, exposed, were forced to release Karabo. I was let go with a warning. Mfo was fined. Cabello was kicked out of the hostel where he worked. But Ruben had disappeared. And then came the final slap in the face. The NGO we turned to for support for the girls, Ubuntu Refuge, refused to get involved. They said they couldn't take in victims without clear documentation. No one wanted to get their hands dirty. The girls were sent to a state shelter, where there weren't even beds for all of them. A week later, Karabo was kidnapped outside her house. Mfo found her hours later in a clinic, her face covered in bruises and her hip broken. "They're sending you messages," he said, unable to meet my eyes. That same night, Cabello disappeared. We went to the police. They did nothing. We sat in silence outside the empty hostel. The streetlights flickered in the breeze. "What now?" I asked. Mfo looked at me for a long while. He had a water bottle in his hands. He gripped it like he could squeeze an answer out of it. "Now no one's going to save us. No one's going to walk through that door and fix this. No one's going to reward us or publish it." Then we lost. No, we're still breathing. That's already a victory here. 2 days later, I received a handwritten note slid under the door of the room where I was staying. It wasn't the last shipment. It was the second. "They're already preparing the transport to Namibia. If you don't stop them, no one will." There was no signature. It wasn't anonymous. It was written in Nambula's shaky handwriting. And just below, an address. A new warehouse. A new hell.